Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So hello, I'm Mihael Brenčič, coming from University of Ljubljana, Department of Geology. From my experiences, I am hydrogeologist, working on several fields, and in the frame of I'm responsible as a leader of the so-called Task 1, which is related to the state of the art. So our aim and goal in this group was to collect all available and relevant information regarding emerging contaminants. So in our group work also other researchers and workers, and I would like to acknowledge them. Anja, Ines and Matea, who helped a lot and did the main work. So let's go first to review a little bit what was our aim and goal inside of the boDEREC project. First of all, as I said before, we have to review the state of the art of handling, monitoring and treatment of PPCPs. But I would like to say that we have a lot of discussion. Should we focus only on PPCs, so personal care products and cosmetics? But we find out that our project requires a little bit wider view. So we also focused in so-called emerging contaminants and not only in one group. So, and from that point of view, we try to see what are different views and approaches. And we were not only focused, let's say, in the scientific point of view, so in the sense, what are the concentrations of particular contaminants, where they are, and so on. But we were also focused in, let's say, some other issues from political point of view, policy point of view, legislation, monitoring, and of course, at the end, of the engineering point of view, because at the end and as it was seen in the former presentation, this question is very important. So we divided our working package in several subtopics, which represent different outputs, and they are also related to the different socio-political issues, because this is important part of the program we are working inside. And of course, it is also very well related to different project partners in the project. So just briefly show you what we worked. As I said, there are several activities, several packages inside of our activities, and there is just a brief overview how it looks. The work was consisting on national reports, but these national reports were somehow predated with our work on so-called questionnaire system. I called it so. There was a set of questionnaires, and each questionnaire was related to the different working package. And first of all, this working package developed first national reports. So it means that each partner produced their own national report for the state, and then these national reports were synthesized in so-called transnational reports. And you can see these transnational reports in green color, and then later on in the final stages, they were synthesized in so-called outputs. And we produced two outputs. You can see them listed here. First one was state of the art of the current practices in relation to emerging contaminants in the water environment. And the second one was so-called data collection tool for emerging contaminants. And as maybe you can see, this working task, this working group finished its work. So the results are already available, especially these outputs. So let's go to the results of our work. As I said before, preparation of deliverables was based on the questionnaires, and this was an important process of our work. The questionnaires, they are following out from the proposal, of course, because we already there defined what are the tasks. And we did also during the process and during the working on the package, we also analyzed possible interactions between water cycle and emerging contaminants. So we were focused really on the whole water cycle, or if you want, aquatic environment. And we tried to understand also various implications of emerging contaminants, not, as I said before, just a scientific one, but also socio-economic implications. So from that point of view, we also collect information about legislation. We collect also information about policy and management and governance. And I have to say that this was really a collective effort of all project partners. Of course, different states or different nations participating in this project, they have different background, different legislation, but from that point of view, the results are also interesting. So what was the process of the questionnaire collection and preparation? We tried to focus in several important issues, and these issues were definition of emerging contaminants. Then, based on this, we try to identify the problems related to the definition of emerging contaminants or emerging contaminants per se. Then we discuss a lot about the monitoring strategies. Of course, if we are talking about the monitoring, we have to look also into the analytical techniques. And of course, finally, when we have a monitoring, we have results. But these results, they have to lead us to so-called attenuation strategies. But these attenuation strategies are not only meant as a technical issues, but also in wider meaning. So this is the general scheme of our work. And what we want to say is that this preparation of the state of the art was some kind of the learning process. So, and how this learning process looks like. It is defined somehow by the project description. So this was already done by partners during the, let's say, pre-development of the project. And then we try also to develop further procedures for the collection of available data and information. And this was step-by-step learning process, which was required also by the project description or proposal. And what are results? I will just show you some graphs briefly, because the deliverables we produce are really a large one. So we try to collect different topics and we looked also from different points of view to the data collected. And you can see, for instance, here, what different definitions of emerging contaminants in national reports are. And you can see some kind of the histogram. And what is the surprising is that, this term emerging contaminant is really very wide one. So there are from chemicals, different substances, even microorganisms, and which is not shown here, also microplastics. Of course, then these emerging contaminants, they have different relations, they have different understanding in different sources of information, and you can see here that we can divide this information widely in the knowledge, let's say, chapter, then source, path, receptor, understanding, then effects of these contaminants, and so on, just briefly to show some results. And at the end of this part, we try to define what is, in fact, emerging contaminant. Of course, in the literature, you can find several definitions. Some of them were already listed in the presentations before. But we decided finally, based on the discussion inside of the project with several partners, several experts, that emerging contaminants represent a group of potential pollutants that are either newly created, newly identified, newly detected, or newly researched. So classifications of emerging contaminants are also important. There are, of course, many classifications in the literature, and we find out that these classifications are based on intended use or source of chemicals. They can be industrial chemicals, pharmaceutical, personal care products, biocides, artificial sweeteners, and so on. And we also recognize other possible classifications, such as a chemical quantitative based on effects and several combined classifications. So we listed all these classifications in our report, and there are, as I said, several of them. And although that there is a common European framework guiding the national legislature for all partner countries, because all partner countries are inside European community, there are considerable differences in research and monitoring stages of each individual country participating in the project. So there are, again, some graphical representations of the classifications of emerging contaminants, as I said before. Here you see on the right-hand side, on the upper corner, several classification approaches. They can be classified according to the sources, according to the chemicals, according to the effects, according to the quantity and size. And of course, there are many other classifications. So there are no one common classification of the chemical or emerging contaminants. So you can see that there are really various aspects of this question, how to classify the emerging contaminants. So there are also very different practices regarding monitoring and sampling procedures, and of course also related to analytical approaches. So you can see here just some pie diagrams related to the monitoring collection information, and you can see that there are also very different approaches in the monitoring of the aquatic environment, or let's say aquatic compartments. So there are different, let's say, relations between different aquatic compartments. And we realize that this is very much related to the, let's say, water cycle of the country participating. But not only this, it is very much related to the how and what are the practices of drinking water supply. In some countries, the drinking water supply is represented mainly by the groundwater. And in other countries, it is represented with a different share between surface water, standing water bodies, or groundwater. So it depends very much how the country is using water for water supply, and what are of course natural conditions in the country. As I said before, we also try to focus also on the wider issues of emerging contaminants during the collection of data. And we try to understand how these, let's say, scientific issues are transferred into the policies and all other socio-economic related issues. There are, of course, several possible ways how to transfer the scientific or technical information into the policy and other legislation processes. And here you can see some illustrations. Let's say, for instance, what are the existences of national monitoring guidelines on emerging contaminants. And we can see here that the situation is very different from country to country. There are some countries which they have these guidelines, but some of them are not. Then you can see what are the, let's say, factors which are influencing the governance initiatives related to the emerging contaminants, and so and so. So I have no time to go into detail what we find out from this collection. So what are general conclusions of our working package? Of course, it is very important, and it was already stressed during the former presentation, that it is very important that we are continuing to observe and collect data relating to emerging contaminant in the aquatic environment. In general, there is a common understanding that emerging contaminants occur in the aquatic environment, and that it is very important that we proceed also this analysis, not only with the existing approaches concerning how to analyze them, but it's also very important to include newly developed analytical techniques, because they are uncover also additional information which are also important for understanding how the emerging contaminants are behaving inside of the aquatic environment. There are many open questions how to communicate these results to water policy, water management, and governance. It was already stressed that this information regarding appearance of emerging contaminants inside the water environment are very sensitive. And we find out that there are also different issues in different, let's say, socio-economical environments. Some of them are more sensitive to other questions than others. So this is also very important issues which should be tackled in the future. So based on the analysis and interpretation of the collected data, the following recommendation can be made. Of course, these recommendations will be improved during the project, because somehow we collect the data, and now based on the results of this collection, we should also proceed and think a little bit more in the second half of our project. But of course, existing monitoring of aquatic environment must be upgraded, not only with the measuring existing emerging contaminants, because there are some already listed and required to be investigated or observed, but we must add also some new and additional contaminants. In relation to emerging contaminants, all aquatic compartments must be monitoring, and what we see out from the results of the collection of the data, we see that there are a lack of data on wetlands and on standing water bodies. And as I said before, new and updated analytical techniques must be included in the regular monitoring. Then there is a need for better understanding of emerging contaminants in relation to ecotoxicological impact on the aquatic environment. There are plenty of data, but still we lack a lot of information. And what is also important, especially national legislation, but of course also European one, related to emerging contaminants must be upgraded on the regular basis and on the regular experiences. And we can see that there is somehow a gap between the transfer of scientific knowledge and professional knowledge to legislation. And there are many gaps in understanding, and there are many gaps in the knowledge how these socio-economic implications of emerging contaminants are present. We have to improve this knowledge, especially how results of monitoring are transferred to the common and wider understanding of emerging contaminants in the public. So that's all from my point, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mihael, for your very interesting presentation. As you could see, we've done a lot of work in study any possibility